Ed Gunderson, former head of the FBI in Southern California. Retired in 1979. I furnished considerable information to B.J. Wagener. If you want the full story, you want to know what's going on, watch B.J. Wagener.
Welcome to On Second Thought. I am Brianna Moore, co-hosting today. Thank you for joining us where William J. Wagener gives you reason to have second thoughts. And now for the host and producer, the good guy in the white hat, William J. Wagener.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I am William Wagener.
On this date, March 6, 1836, the Alamo fell. For more than 13 days, 186 brave and determined patriots withstood Santa Anna's seasoned army of over 4,000 troops. To a man, the defenders of that mission fort knew they would never leave those ramparts alive. They had several opportunities to leave and live, yet they chose to fight and to die. How foolish they must look to this generation of spoiled Americans. It is difficult to recall that stout-hearted men such as Davy Crockett, a nationally known frontiersman and a former congressman, Will Travis, only 23 years old with a little baby at home, and Jim Bowie, a wealthy landowner on both sides of the Rio Grande, really existed. These were real men with real dreams and real desires. Real blood flowed through their veins. They loved their families and enjoyed life as much as any of us do today. Even in their death, they had more freedom. There was something different about them, however. They possessed a commitment to liberty that transcended personal safety and comfort. Liberty is an easy word to say, but a hard word to live up to. Freedom has little to do with financial gain or personal pleasure. Accompanying freedom is her constant and very unattractive companion, responsibility. Today, Tuesday, while a jury of 12 ordinary Americans convicted Scooter Libby of 4 or of 5 felonies of obstructing justice to protect the Vice President Cheney and ultimately to protect President George W. Bush, who will no doubt grant Libby a full pardon before Bush goes out of office. Today, on the day 186 brave Texans, later to be known as Americans, died at the mission fort Alamo, March 6th in 1836. Do we have any brave patriots left? Yes, Ed Brown in New Hampshire is doing a standoff, refusing to surrender after the kangaroo trial he got in a federal court over income taxes that are illegally enforced as if they were mandatory, even though Internal Revenue Service Commissioner always says they're a voluntary compliance. The 17th, 2007, I'm on a phone call with Ed Brown, New Hampshire. And Ed, do you give me permission to record this conversation?
Yes, I do.
Ed, tell me what year your battle with the IRS started and how it got to the kangaroo trial situation you're in now, and why you're refusing to go to court, specifically what you believe is going to happen.
I'm asking the court, the IRS to show us the law as to the fact that Edward and Lane Brown owe the income tax that they claim. For about 5 or 6 months later, then in retaliation to that, they dismissed that case because it was sent from the state court that we submitted it to the federal court, which was unlawful.
But if you don't comply, We're going to take everything you got. Yes, we have patriots like Rick Stanley in Denver, Colorado, who was arrested for doing nothing more than simply carrying a sidearm, which the Colorado state constitution guaranteed him a right to do.
Michael Badnarik, who now is the Libertarian Party presidential candidate, he stood by me from the very beginning. What they did was they called the income tax a voluntary tax. Up until recently, the last few years, they've stopped calling it a voluntary tax. And that was their way of getting around the fact that they couldn't tax Americans' wages directly. So that's a very important issue. And I think once Americans find out about this, they'll stop filing. Now, I stopped filing in the year 2000. I believe that once enough Americans do stop filing, the IRS income tax will be no more. Several years ago, the IRS put out a statement that said 65 million people didn't file income taxes. Today, I'm sure it's much greater. I believe it's probably closer to 100 million people not filing the income taxes. And to tell you the truth, people like me have been baiting the IRS and inviting them to come and harass us. I'd love to go to court with the Section 861 evidence and then have the judge explain to me how he wasn't going to put it into evidence, which is what they do all the time. We've also recently discovered that.
Yet he served 2 terms of 90 days or more in county jails, one in Denver and one in Adams County, Colorado, in spite of the law that says he had a right to do so. Yes, we still have patriots, like the aging 80-some-year-old William Benson, who wrote the book, The Law That Never Was, a 2-volume treatise where he went to all the states that existed in 1913 and proved they could not have adopted the federal personal income tax because they passed on it or passed over it. They did not approve it, despite what Philander Knox said, because he was answering to the central banksters, the federal private banksters we now call the Federal Reserve, which is a bank in Paris, a bank in London, 2 or 3 American banks in New York City. It's made up of a consortium of private banks that issue your private money. I think today, March 6th, is a significant day. We've all but forgotten Davy Crockett, Will Travis, Jim Bowie, who was famous for his Bowie knife. We have all but forgotten them. I think a full pardon will be granted by Bush for Scooter Libby, who's known for scooting under the law and getting away from things. That's how he came up with the nickname Scooter. He's been doing dirty tricks for the Republican Party since he was in college. Today, a jury of people like you and me said, enough. They found him guilty. 4 out of 5 charges. I wonder why the prosecutors didn't indict Cheney and Karl Rove. Why were they allowed to scoot free? The commentators are already spinning the story that the jury verdict could be set aside because they were confused. What did Libby do? Well, what Libby did is what Karl Rove and the vice president wanted them to do, because the ambassador was not totally on board with the Bush administration. They leaked out that his wife was a CIA agent, and suddenly the whole world knew. This endangered the wife of an ambassador, as well as the life of the ambassador, she was, an active CIA agent. By revealing her identity, they endangered a lot of people, and they shook the trust of other CIA agents around the world who wonder if they might be exposed if they in any way look like they're not on board with the Bush administration, and you're either with me or against me. And Karl Rove and Cheney should have been indicted as well. But because the America we once loved has been transformed into a police state where, like the Roman emperor, there is no accountability for the people at the top. There just isn't. There wasn't for President William Clinton. There is none for George W. Bush or Vice President Cheney. who thinks he can shoot an attorney in the face and walk away with the warning. I suggest you try accidentally shooting an attorney in the face and see what the sheriff does to you. But maybe you shouldn't try it. You might end up in jail for the rest of your life, but not Vice President Cheney. No, he got a warning. Cheney will never be held accountable for Bush under the current government and the current system of government. We've left the American Republic in the ashes, burned to embers in Baghdad and Afghanistan and Vietnam, with undeclared wars. Until enough Americans demand a full and real 9/11 investigation, it's not likely we will ever get our country back again. Meanwhile, today, March 6th, Tuesday, the House of Representatives were avoiding any talk of impeachment of Cheney and or Bush by passing resolutions about women's reproductive freedom. And our very own Congress critter Lois Capps made herself available for this.
For what the gentlewoman from California is recognized for.
Thank you. And so as we become that role model for so many democracies around the world and so many emerging democracies, as we see that we have challenges facing our women in this country, and let us celebrate then International Women's Day this Thursday, making a firmer commitment to improving the lives of women here in the United States and throughout this world. I thank my colleague for yielding.
The gentlewoman from California is recognized.
While avoiding impeachment talk on the day Scooter Libby is convicted.
Now, we understand he is facing 30 years here, convicted on all counts, but tell us about the federal sentencing guidelines. We're hearing that it may not be anything more than 2 to 3 years.
Well, that's right. Under the guidelines, probably Libby would receive 2 to 3 years, but remember, the guidelines were ruled advisory a few years ago. It's not clear what Judge Walton will do. We do know that Judge Walton was upset because he felt that he was essentially spun by the defense in terms of whether Libby would testify or not, and a lot of evidence came in, security intelligence information, that he might not have let in if he didn't think, if he thought that Libby was not going to testify.
Scooter Libby is convicted. Not a word about impeachment. Not a word about going after Karl Rove or going after Vice President Cheney. Maybe they'll bring back the corpse of Anna Nicole to keep you more distracted. Then a federal building in D.C. for education was dedicated under the House Resolution Bill law to an established murderer. This to me is just unbelievable. Anybody that saw the Kennedy Chronicles, anybody that's done any research, knows for a certain fact that very credible producers and authors have established that Lyndon Baines Johnson was responsible for the murder of 7 Americans, including his own sister, and right up to he was an accessory to the death of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, so he could rise to the presidency. And yet, what was Joe Barton from Missouri doing today? And others, they were praising Lyndon Baines Johnson because he started out as a humble Texas school teacher, and they want to name a federal education building after him. Go Google Billy Saul Estes and start digging into all that nasty stuff from 40 years ago, and you'll begin to understand what a criminal Johnson was. Interesting that Libby's case has been going for months and brewing for years, and you hardly heard a word about it on national TV all these many months. While in 2004 to 2007, we were drowned in endless news and commentator reports about a missing girl in Aruba that only affects a few family members, about the Michael Joe Jackson trial, which only affected his family and him personally. It didn't really have national import, but you were bombarded with news that oh, he's going to be found guilty. And the media was wrong, except for yours truly. I alone on television said he'll be found not guilty.